I'm not sure. Are we live? I'm pretty sure. Okay.
Looks like we're going.
Yeah, we're live.
Hello, Internet.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm here today, joined by Brian Chow. We're doing this live together. Brian is a veritable genius, one of the few people that can still beat ChatGPT in coding because he won the Gold Olympian medal for informatics. Is the former founder and CEO of Alliance for the Future and one of the founding faculty members of the Network School here in Singapore, where we are recording.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Oh my God, I
Sorry,
remember
I gave you so much to talk about.
I remember everything. So we're going to try to do this live series in which we talk about the most important events in the AI space. Specifically, we got 3 pieces of news every week, and those are the most important news that you need to know if you want to stay ahead of 99% of the people that use AI. Okay? And they're like a mix of nerdy stuff plus pop stuff, but we're going to try to make it as accessible as possible. And Brian really knows what he's talking about, so you should definitely listen to him. Let's start with news number 1.
So what are we talking about?
I saw this paper from OpenAI, and it's about, this paper explains why large language models like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini hallucinates. Like, you know, when ChatGPT, I'm sure people know what I'm talking about. Sometimes ChatGPT will BS you,
Yeah, it'll say something as if it were true. They'll say, 100% this is the case, but it'll turn out that's wrong. And when you're talking to a normal person, a lot of the time, they'll be very clear with you. Well, I kind of think this is my opinion, but I don't know about it for sure. But with ChatGPT and with a lot of these language models, it tends to be just right or wrong. It's either this is definitely true or it's definitely not true. And OpenAI released a paper recently that really tries to explain why that happens.
Okay. Can you explain for the rest of us, meaning like for mortals, what does this paper say about hallucinations? I read the paper, I found that there are some very interesting nuggets, but I have also very specific questions on how are we really solving this, or it's just like a fix, right? Because that's one of the points, I guess, of the paper.
The big picture idea is that, according to OpenAI, that the models are just doing what we're telling them to. That when we train AI models and when we customize them, we have very strict ways of assessing how well they're doing. So we essentially reward them. We say they're doing well. They should move more in this direction if they follow a certain set of rules that we have. And that set of rules penalizes getting a completely wrong answer, or rewards getting a completely right answer, much more than it rewards kind of being clear about how much you really know. In other words, you can think of it as like a multiple choice test. They use this example in the paper. If you're a student, let's say you're a high school student, you're taking the SAT for the first time. They'll actually tell you this when you're preparing for the SAT. When you have a multiple choice question, you should just guess. And all of us will do that. I mean, for sure, if I had a question that I didn't really know the answer to, I'd just guess, right? And that's because you get points for getting it right. You don't really lose points for taking a wild guess, even if you don't know anything. And the same thing is true about how we train AI models.
Yeah. So, and in the paper, they explain basically why is this happening. So it's a problem that arises because of the nature, basically, the probabilistic natures of large language models. Like, it's impossible that they've seen all the data multiple times, so they just have to guess. But I think the thing that blew my mind is the point that they argue that is we're actually making it way worse during post-training and in the evaluation phase. It's like basically we're giving them an incentive for deceiving us. And whenever I read something like that, I'm like, oh, this is a real problem when it comes to alignment and safety of model, because we are really giving them an incentive.
Yeah. So
indirectly, right?
Exactly. And I mentioned before that this was kind of like taking an SAT. I have a question from one of the most widely used AI, what are called AI evaluations, right here.
Like,
I can
okay.
show you. And if you take a look at the screen, it's literally like an SAT question. It's this multiple choice question about chemistry. And what the AI is essentially assessed on is how many multiple choice questions it can get right.
Oh, wow.
So you literally have the circumstance that's exactly the same as the SAT, where AI models score higher if they just guess, if they get the answer right, but don't really get rewarded for expressing uncertainty or for saying, I don't really know, and being very clear with an actual person, which is what you would want it to do. And so when you're doing this post-training process, which is supposed to be, in theory, separated from the tests, so they're not supposed to be directly trained on the tests, of course. That would be really crazy and like basically a form of fraud. But they're not specifically trained on the tests, but the engineers are still trying to make sure that the AI models do well on these kinds of tests, even if they're using separate data or if they're using separate methods. And so they have this economic incentive as well as just like a kind of mathematical incentive to make the models much better at essentially, teaching to the test, at getting these multiple choice questions right, and not to have them behave in the way that you would expect, which is to, if they're not really sure, then not to guess, but just to say they're not really sure.
Yeah, I guess like there is a boundary where if they're not sure all the time and they just say, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, like there is, you can argue about the usefulness, but there is also a lot to be said that those models hallucinate a lot. And then like most people just don't catch that. And
although I think one of the interesting findings of the paper was that it was quite possible to increase the rate where models are not sure without decreasing the rate of purely getting the right answer. So for example, they made this comparison between GPT-5 Thinking or GPT-5 Thinking Mini and O4 Mini. So they have this older version, O4, and then they have this newer version, GPT-5. And through one of their modifications, they were able to increase the rate where the AI model says they're not sure, where GPT-5 says it's not sure, from 1% to 52%, while the accuracy rate only went from 24% to 22%. In other words, so this was a set of very hard questions. Their accuracy rate slightly went down by 2%, right? But their rate of admitting they didn't know the answer, instead of just making up some random answer, went up by almost 50%.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah. Is this like in the section of the paper where they talk about, if you give the model a list of options, they're much less prone to hallucinate than like at generating, like if they just generate from scratch?
Yeah, I think this was at the very beginning of the paper, as well as the very beginning of the blog post. It's a very interesting paper because it really throws back in my mind to this kind of distinction between theoretical machine learning and experimental machine learning. Much like the distinction between theoretical physics and experimental physics, right? You have the people who build the rockets and you have the people who kind of theorize about what happens in the black holes. And this is kind of the same thing, where they have a little bit of empirical evidence. They talk about this modification to GPT-5. They don't actually really explain how they did the modification. But they talk about these general ideas, these general mathematical principles and incentives, and the theoretical reasons why their AI models might be hallucinating.
Yeah. Do you think, so now we sort of finally got an explanation of why LLM hallucinates, which is pretty exhaustive, I feel. But what about the solution? In particular, do you feel like that now that we have a way, basically, to, many people say solve hallucinations. I don't think it's solved. Like, I think you can contain it, right? Or make it.
Yeah. Well,
do you think it's solved, actually?
With all of the machine learning models we have today, it's sort of like whatever, you just throw whatever you can at the wall and make it work, right?
Yeah.
That's how all of the AI companies are run. Even Google, Meta, that's how they're run. They just try random stuff, and if it works, it works. So I think it's less about finding the solution, the 100%. We finally figured it all out that we can use to kind of push things up the hill and make things better. And I think that even just in the past few years, it's at least gotten better, right?
Yeah.
GPT-5 has hallucinated less. All these other companies, they've been improving too. They're not perfect, but that's the engineering process.
Yeah.
They're putting things together step by step. They're running experiments. If it works, then it works. And that's all kind of fun.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think, however, that those the major AI companies like OpenAI or Claude or like Anthropic or like Google, do they have an incentive to like make their model say, hey, I don't know, right? Like, will they trade off honesty, let's say, for again, which was actually a very interesting point. You need to say again what we were saying before.
Yeah, we were talking about the financial incentives, right?
Okay, apologies. There is a bit of a delay here. So apologies for everyone that was following the live. We had a problem with the Wi-Fi connection, but we're back. And actually, Brian was making like a super interesting point. We were talking about the economic incentives of AI labs to admit when their models are confident regarding a reply. And if they are not confident, just say, I don't know, or state their confidence level. So maybe we can repeat that.
Yeah, I think the AI companies have a lot of incentive to just make the products that work for their users, right? A friend of mine, very successful investor, said, Sam Altman will just keep winning at everything that makes the ChatGPT app experience the best. That's their priority as a company. If it's something that directly affects someone using the app, then he'll be just fascinated with it. He'll make sure the entire company just like targets that problem. But if it's something that's kind of outside that core domain, then they're going to spend less time on it. But I think actually a lot of users really rely on ChatGPT, and it's actually very important for them that ChatGPT is honest if it doesn't have the information they need. For example, if you're creating a month-long software project and you use ChatGPT to do your research, then at the very beginning, if it leads you down the wrong path and it's very certain about that, that can actually be a lot worse than if it tells you don't know. You'll spend days, weeks, months down this rabbit hole trying to solve a problem that's impossible because you started with the wrong starting ideas. And so I think there's actually a very big incentive for companies to make sure that their models are honest.
Yeah, I think so too. But however, so I think you have to distinguish honest about what, like, because we're talking business. 100% agree with you. Like, you're developing software, you want the model to be honest when it doesn't know. You're telling the model to do a deep research for you. Like, you're using deep research. You want the model to be confident of the information and like give you the exact references because you don't want to make stuff up, right? But like one of the main use cases for ChatGPT is like therapy, companionship. Actually, the #1 use case for generative AI, period, not just for OpenAI, but particularly for OpenAI. A lot of people are using ChatGPT as a therapist.
Oh, that's really fascinating.
Yeah, and like I'm not sure how people want to hear about the truth, but then you can argue if that falls under the realm of hallucination or it's just like a sycophancy problem. Are those two things related somehow?
Yeah, they're related through the techniques that AI companies and engineers use to control those behaviors, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier this idea of post-training, which is that at the very beginning, when you're creating an AI model, you have this really expensive process where you're taking all of the data on the internet and you're training it in this very unstructured way, what's called unsupervised or self-supervised learning. And the step after that, you have these very specific data sets of human data. People go in and make sure that these data and this human data set represents a specific thing. And they use that data set along with much more brute force methods to change the behavior of an AI model. So the ChatGPT that you have in front of you, it's not just a result of all of the training data of the internet, but it's the result of specific curated decisions by like the OpenAI product team. And so when you're talking about either hallucinations, reducing the error rate, or increasing the rate where the AI models admit that they don't know, or if you're talking about general behavior, they're modified using the same methods.
Okay, so they're both under control. I am very curious now if after the publication of this paper, they actually, changed ChatGPT behavior to admit, hey, I don't know. I think I saw it starting more to express the fact that it's not super confident, like getting more comfortable with it. I read in another paper, I think was a research from Anthropic, that hallucinations also happen. I'm pretty sure I'm going to butcher this and you're going to say this way better than I do. But hallucinations happen also because a model, when it starts answering, even if it's not sure about something, it just cannot stop itself. Basically, it's like a snowball effect.
Yeah, it can be the case that so essentially AI models generate text part by part, right? Chunk by chunk. This chunk is called a token in the AI world. but it's around the length of a word, right? It's maybe a little bit shorter than a word. So if you're trying to create a sentence word by word, then you might end up that at the beginning of the sentence, it seems like you really have the answer, right? It seems like that you're just about to start a new essay, start a new paragraph, and and most of the way these paragraphs start, it's not, it turns out I was wrong. Most of the ways these paragraphs start is, well, this is right, and here's the answer, and here's how it works. So it might start that way, and once you start that, then it'll continue, and it'll essentially like go in this pattern where, because it already generated the parts of the paragraph that would only make sense if it was answering as if it was correct, then it will just finish that second half by saying it was correct.
I am so fascinated by how all of this work. Like, I think it's a kind of magic, really.
One thing I want to add is that in the post-training step, actually a lot of companies have gone on to specifically add sentences or paragraphs of people or AI models correcting themselves to try to create this behavior.
Yeah.
And it's led to a lot of problems as well. Like, sometimes they'll get stuck in a loop where it's just correcting itself over and over, and they have to fix that too. But they specifically included data sets where it's just like the same types of sentences over and over again. It's like, oh, I thought this. Wait, it turns out I'm wrong. Now I think this instead. And they use that as part of their post-training process to specifically try to engineer this kind of behavior from the AI models.
This is so fascinating. Do you think AI companies will do something about it? Okay, we got the paper. Actually, I read another paper. This one was about OpenAI and Anthropic testing each other's models for safety.
Mm-hmm.
One of the critiques of OpenAI to Anthropic, to Claude, is that Claude will say too often, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like up to 70% of the time when it was not confident in a reply. So I feel that maybe Anthropic is already doing that. But OpenAI was saying that this behavior, border being unhelpful. So I wonder how much are they actually gonna implement in their own model, their research, because if 70% is a lot and it borders unhelpful, so maybe they'll find creative ways to.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing there is that you don't want to take away from the true answers, right? So sometimes, you can have three possibilities. Maybe this is a little oversimplified, but at least for some of the more kind of factual questions, either you give the correct answer, you give an incorrect answer, or you say you don't know, right? And if you're starting to say you don't know instead of giving the correct answer, then that's really a problem, because it'd be much more useful if you just got the correct answer.
Yeah.
But if you're starting to say that instead of giving the incorrect answer, then that's actually very helpful, because you're not leading people down. You're not leading people down the wrong road.
Yeah.
So it depends on the context. I think in general, a lot of these kind of safety evaluations, they're not really meant for you or me. They're not meant for normal people. It's really a kind of facade, a kind of charade for governments. That's the whole point.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's for the EU, or it's for, I think the US has gone to a much healthier approach now, but it's for Biden or Harris if she ever gets back into office. It's for people who might want to, it's essentially companies trying to get the government to crack down on their competitors. That's basically all it is. So when companies say that, when OpenAI makes this accusation, or Anthropic, which has really been doing this to everyone, it's been an incredibly toxic company. It's unbelievable. That's what they're trying to do, and I think that at least American politicians are getting increasingly wise to that.
Yeah, I think one day we are gonna have this we can have this conversation, because you can play the US and I can play the EU, and we can ping pong over AI safety and regulation. But today is not the day. However, incredibly fascinating, and maybe we can move on to news number 2, if you feel.
What are we talking about next?
So let's stay with OpenAI.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this news is gonna make a lot of people happy. because OpenAI is going to compete with LinkedIn.
Oh, man.
Yeah, they're going to create their very own job platform for AI job, and they're going to do the entire AI matching. So like imagine ChatGPT that starts recommending you jobs and also matches you to companies, right? That looks for you. But get this is the very important part for our audience. This is your way to make money with AI, because they're going to start certifying people. So like they're going to give away certification that says, hey, you are like an AI expert. This is your level. I don't know how they're going to roll out exactly those certifications, but this is a way for people, to start making money with AI. So they can get certified, and companies can come in and look for certified people by OpenAI, which is I think a pretty big deal. So they don't really specify in the announcement how are they going to roll this out, what the certifications look like, but I'm really curious about your take.
I don't know. Would you hire someone who ChatGPT recommended? Like, let's say I go to ChatGPT. I'm like, okay, I'm trying to hire a software engineer. Who should I hire? And ChatGPT tells me I should hire this person. I think I would at least give them a shot.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to me it will depend on the certification. How serious the certification that they're doing. Is it like a easy peasy multiple test choice that you can just ask ChatGPT to answer for you? How are they doing the certification? That is my question.
That's a really good question. I'm really not sure. I don't think they give a lot of detail here.
No.
So there have been a few models of how to do AI certification. Part of it is still mostly based on the kind of traditional interview process where you're trying to solve a theoretical problem, or you're trying to solve a coding problem, but now you can use AI to do it. You can use AI to help you. Another way is actually using the AI models themselves, where you're kind of going back and forth and you're kind of explaining an idea, and the AI is kind of rating the quality of your explanation. So there are quite a few ways you could do this now. But yeah, in the story, I don't think we have many details about what OpenAI is actually going to do yet.
I think it's more from what I gather from the paper, it's more meant for non-technical people than technical people, because they're talking about partnering, for example, with Walmart to upskill their employee, and it's a partnership with the US government. They also don't say if it's just for the US or if it's a global initiative, by the way. But they're saying that this is a partnership with the US government to upskill basically the population and get there more AI fluent or AI savvy. So I would imagine that it's not a super technical certification.
Yeah, I think that it's a really interesting spot, because right now, a lot of companies, this is kind of zooming out to the entire US economy.
Yeah.
A lot of companies have a capital crunch that they're worried about. Maybe they're worried about tariffs, maybe they're worried about other costs rising, maybe they're worried about labor costs. And at the same time, they're very excited about AI.
Yeah.
So they want to bring in more people to work on AI specifically, but at the same time, they don't really want to bring in that many people.
Yeah.
So if this is the opportunity that OpenAI is kind of seizing on, you can get certified by the biggest, or at least the most famous AI company, or at least the company that's most famous for doing AI, right?
Actually,
that could be an opportunity. But to me, that sounds more like the OpenAI brand than the actual products.
Yeah. I mean, their branding is next level. But how? Okay. Actual.
Wait, do you think their branding is good?
Their branding, pretty awesome. Actually, they really are. When you think AI, you think ChatGPT.
Yeah, that's true. I know a lot of older people. It's kind of like Facebook, right? Where have you seen this meme that's Facebook in America, and it's the small dog, and then Facebook in Asia and Latin America, and it's the super buff dog.
Yes.
It's like Facebook in South America, where it's Facebook is just the internet giant. It's just everything.
Exactly.
And ChatGPT ChatGPT among like Zoomers, among like people under 30, it's like the small dog. Or it's like, okay, like still there's plenty of people under 30 who use ChatGPT. But like ChatGPT among older people, it's just like completely dominant, total victory, like 99% plus. It's like the entire election map. It's just ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Only thing people over 60 are using is ChatGPT.
Yeah. I mean, like a lot of non-technical people are actually using ChatGPT all the time. I feel like that mostly non-technical people are using ChatGPT all the time. I feel like that technical people are the ones that are mainly using other models like Claude and stuff like that.
I think there's still a lot
Gemini,
of ChatGPT use. Gemini is the other big one. That's the other thing I was going to say. But go on. Tell me about Gemini.
Oh.
Gemini is so fire.
Can you give us another 5-10 minutes? Do you have
Okay, yeah, sure. But yeah. If you could just wrap up, I'll call me in 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. I thought about it until 10.
Yeah, all good. Show must go on. But yeah, I mean, the jobs platform. The other big thing, of course, is that the economics of all of these platform companies, it's really a gamble. Because either you get the platform rolling, right? This is the big thing. Yeah. This is the decades-long Silicon Valley wisdom. Once you get the platforms rolling, they can really have like a spirit of their own, right? Yeah. That you join Facebook because everyone's on Facebook. You join TikTok because everyone's on TikTok. Yeah. The network itself becomes the product. Yeah. And I think that's exactly what OpenAI is trying to do, especially as it becomes more and more clear that the different AI companies, they're very competitive with each other in terms of product. So at the beginning, there was this idea at OpenAI, maybe their product would just be so much better that no one else would want to use any of the other models. We're kind of in a medium stage where ChatGPT is just like so much more widely known, and it just has like that brand in the public imagination that's really leading the way for them. But in the long term, that kind of defensibility, that ability to defend a company and offer something that no one else can, I think that's what they're trying to do with the kind of OpenAI LinkedIn. Yeah,
like it's like a top of the mind. Like it's legitimacy. They're going for status. They're going after legitimacy. And they know that like they already cannot compete, for example, with coding with Claude. They tried, but like I don't think they are.
Oh, interesting.
They are
so
like I don't know.
I don't know if we want this to take 5 minutes. However, I think Claude Code is kind of garbage. I think Claude in general is pretty garbage.
Oh my God, controversial opinion over here.
It just inserts so many bugs. And Claude specifically will try to like delete your tests. It's so annoying. But I actually think Gemini is still the best coding model.
You think it's the best coding model?
Gemini takes forever, but Gemini has the lowest error rate in my experience.
That is true. But I feel like that Claude, like if you keep it on a very short leash, like it's not bad.
I don't know, maybe. The line that I use is, Claude is great for writing code if you don't read it and you don't run it.
Yeah, that might be my case. I went from copying from Stack Overflow directly to like ChatGPT and Claude, so that might be the case. He knows way better.
And the reason why I say that is I think people do have like a more fun experience using Claude, and that's worth something, right? But in my experience, like the actual quality of the code,
Gemini is
it might just be the age of Google again.
So like what are you using? Like does Gemini have like a Gemini code, like Claude code?
You can just use it as part of Cursor, which is really funny because like I know Anthropic has spent a lot of time and a lot of money kind of developing for Cursor specifically, and Gemini might just still be better. Yeah.
Oh my God! Like any specific Gemini model that you think is best for our listeners, so that
I use 2.5 Pro. They don't really have, at least not publicly, like a kind of consumer end or like specialized coding model. They should really make one. Like Grok made one recently. Of course, like ChatGPT or like GPT-4 had one. Obviously Anthropic has theirs. Even some of the ones like DeepSeek and Qwen, the open source Chinese companies have them. Yeah, Gemini should, Google should really get on the specialized coding model train.
Okay, you should give us a list, like in order of like the best models for coding. I feel like that a lot of people want to know that.
It's like Google, it's like Gemini, and then like slightly below that is like GPT-5, and then it's like everyone else. You know?
Oh, really? So GPT-5 better at coding than Opus.
Yeah, way better. Like all of the Anthropic models just will like insert bugs all of the time. They'll just produce like pretty garbage code in my experience, and that maybe depends on the specific code base. But I don't think it's like, you know, I think that as a base model, it's much
We're
weaker.
live. Sorry.
I know, but I booked
Yeah.
the studio.
That's a good place to
wrap up.
Yeah,
Okay. So
I mean we've kind of drifted away.
yeah. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Brian, for being here. Well, let us know in the comments if you like this format, if you want to see more of this. We'll cut little pieces of this interview and put it out there as a short form content. But have a wonderful evening and see you all next time. Cheers.